morning, gentlemen. Pleasure to be speaking with you today. We're sitting here with two leaders whose companies have positively impacted well over 1 million lives globally. So today we have Louis Senior, CEO of Equilibria, and Rob Fisher, President of Fisher Improvement Technologies. So Louis, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background, please?
Yeah, thank you. I started in the oil field in the 1970s. Spent 30 years doing that, saw way too many people hurt, maimed and killed, and in 2004, along with some partners, decided to start an organization called Equilibria. And a few years later, had the privilege of meeting Rob.
Awesome. So Louis, where do you live now?
In Spain.
Great.
And that's where my family are, but right now we're over in Charlotte, having the privilege of spending some time in the wonderful offices of Fisher IT.
Excellent. Thank you. Very nice to meet you today. Rob, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself and your background?
Certainly. Well, my name's Rob Fisher, and I got my start in the U.S. Nuclear Navy and submarines, special operations. Then I moved out into U.S. nuclear power, and it was after 3 Mile Island and Chernobyl, and nuclear power was starting to ask the questions, if we'd have put different people in the same situation, would they have done the same thing in some of these major accidents? And the human error experts said, yes, they probably would have. And so at the facility that I worked at, we got in some trouble. And in order to get out of trouble, we started using a bunch of different types of tools. So I led the human performance efforts, or the human error reduction efforts at that facility. And I guess I got good at it, and they started farming me out. And in about 1993, I started my first company, and that Fisher Improvement Technologies has been around in one form or another since 1993. I left commercial nuclear power in about 1996, and have focused mostly on industry since then. So about 25 years we've been helping people understand why we make mistakes, especially mistakes that could prove to be catastrophic.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Rob. So understanding that you're coming from a military and nuclear background, your company focuses on human and organizational performance, and for Louis, coming from an oil and gas background, and his company focuses on personality diversity. Tell us, how did you meet? How is it that two leaders from such different backgrounds are here together, and I believe in partnership today?
Yeah. So we had a mutual client who had actually been working. We'd both been working with the client for several years, and they got to a point where they had seen both our technologies and thought it might be a good idea for us to meet. And as we were preparing for this interview, it certainly gave us a chance to reflect on the opportunity that we'd been given. We were brought together to see if we were prepared to work together, and within an hour meeting in California, we decided that not only would we like to work together, but it would be a perfect combination that would help so many more people.
Yeah, I agree. You know, it was a little bit serendipitous that we got put together, and it was really a function of a client not necessarily wanting to do two diverse things, but wondering if there were any synergies there. Well, for about 25 years, I've known that our personalities had something to do with how we see and manage risk, but regardless of which of the personality regimens we looked at, I couldn't make them fit because I wasn't able to capture the element of the personality tendencies in the human and organizational performance, or HP, systems that we were using. But what we discovered was that Equilibria was quietly but largely around the world understanding, here's how people see and manage risk, here's what happens. So we were able to put that and integrate that into our human performance system and come up with a strategy that actually makes people see and manage risk as organizations, as individuals, better. And then we were able to take that back to that client. And oddly enough, you know, it's been human performance, human error reduction has been a long time developing. In February, it'll be 5 years.
Yep.
that we've known each other and really become best friends. And in those 5 years, we've actually been able to develop the technology to be a lot more holistic than either of us or most other functions are able to bring to the table.
So you saw the opportunity, what it could do for people, the kind of impact that it could have. So what actually made you want to partner with each other as leaders? What made you want to partner?
Well, I think that morning at breakfast, we both started the conversation not with we might want to partner, not with we're here to see about any synergies, not with we want to collaborate, but with there's some people in this other organization that think we would get on well together. And it started as a conversation about who we are, where we come from, and how we approach things. We both have family-owned and run businesses. We both operate in multiple countries. Our value statements in our organizations were almost identical. Our method about being a lot more relational than transactional was almost identical. It was as if we were operating as two different entities, but our operating philosophies were so close that we could have made the synergies in the technology. I think actually, for my part, I just wanted to work with him and see where that might go.
Yeah. And that is very much mirroring on what Rob is saying. When we first got together, actually at his home on the lake, it became very clear very quickly that using our own technology, we could actually move forward. So we have something called the Essential Leadership Cycle, which starts with self and team awareness and very quickly moves into shared vision and values. And that was the first thing I think that really caught both our attention. Our values and vision were so close. And if you think about it, the science of human performance, when you bring together that with the technology of personality diversity, the technology itself would have stood alone. But from there, as he said, we've developed the most interesting and long-lasting relationship that will go on for many, many generations, hopefully.
Yeah.
Excellent. That's really, really great to hear. So now that we understand a little bit of what brought you together and the partnership with Fisher Improvement Technologies and Equilibria, I'd like to learn a little bit more about yourselves as leaders individually. So could you tell us, maybe Rob, if you don't mind, we'll start with you. Why do you do what you do?
I think when I started, there was a sense that the collection of root cause and procedures in human performance and nuclear power was about protecting the plant and protecting the public. But I saw a real opportunity to protect the people as well. And as I started moving out into industry and our organization moved out into industry, I started seeing that people would use our technology at home, at work, and at play. And really about 75% of the comments we get from people on recognizing a risk that they didn't see before and minimizing or mitigating that risk come from people at home. It saved them or a family member from getting hurt, maimed, or killed, as Lewis well says. And I latched onto that as a real value that I can personally add while I'm here on this earth, that we can make people safer, we can make people happier, we can help them realize their potential. I started using, by the time we partnered up, I started using our understanding of personality tendencies and personality diversities to be able to give people an opportunity to make their lives better. And the work life was just part of that. And of course, as you well know, we saw that in the reduction in fatalities, serious and life-altering injuries. In almost every high-risk workplace that we went into that deployed effectively, we saw those elements. And so that, it really got inside my heart that was an opportunity we were offering the world, for lack of a better way to say it, that maybe it stroked my ego a little bit, but the reality was we're hearing from the people who were impacted exactly what it was doing to their lives. And that's a constant recharging, because a week doesn't go by without us hearing from someone that we've impacted positively, either at work or at home or at play. And it's just it's a wonderful feeling to be able to have that impact.
Thanks for sharing that, Rob. What about yourself, Louis? So tell us a little bit about why do you do what you do?
So, funny enough, the other day we were talking in the car about what is your degree? Chemical, what was the chemical?
Well, I'm a chemist.
He's a chemist, very bright individual, totally underplays, see? Whereas I know that I did not do well at school. In fact, I wanted to be a veterinary surgeon and could not get the grades I needed in physics, chemistry and biology, and found my way into the oil field in the 1970s in the UK, where nobody knew what an oil rig is. When I told my mother and dad I was going on an oil rig, the first question out the mouth was, what's an oil rig? So I turned up on this oil rig, and 11 people got killed on the first 6 months I was on the rig. And it seemed normal. I mean, unfortunately, in those days, people actually thought it was normal. I then went
doing business almost.
Yeah, that was the way that business was done. I went overseas for a while, came back when there was a bit of a downturn, and was actually about 6 miles away the night the Piper Alpha blew up. And so many people lost their lives unnecessarily that night. And I made my mind up then that later on in my life, if I could do something, and I wasn't sure what it was then, to help people not to go through that, then I was going to do something about it. Certainly in those days, the people who got promoted, certainly in the drilling contractor world that I worked in, were people who were very technically competent. And like a lot of industries today, you can be technically competent, that doesn't turn you into a great leader. I, on the other hand, am technically incompetent, but I'm pretty good around people, which is true. And so my path became quite easy for me in terms of managing and leading people. I started with the drilling contract I worked for, just got larger and larger. We were buying and merging with more companies, and I got exposed to a lot of people to see how they were doing their business compared to where we were, and got to a point in the mid-90s where they actually made me the health and safety manager for the whole organization. And coming from a background where I was continually working with people on my own rigs to where we weren't having any incidents. In fact, I used to call my rigs the University of Safety. When I started in the HES role and we started to merge and acquire, we killed a lot of people in a very short space of time. And it really got to me. As I learned more about what today we call the E-colors and personality diversity, I became a slave to my own potential limiters. I have this strong desire to help people. And in 2002, I actually finished off laying on the floor thinking I was dying, having just completely overstressed and overworked myself to a point of no return, basically. I woke up a few days later in the hospital with my wife standing at the end of the bed, telling me there was nothing wrong with me, just get out of bed and get some rest.
Tell her what she said. Tell them what she said in Spanish.
She actually said, "Levántate, gilipollas, no te pasa nada," which means get up, you idiot, there's nothing wrong with you.
I love that story.
But I had got to a point where I literally exhausted myself trying to help other people. So I decided to start a company and do something about it. The drilling contractor I was working with told me, look, spend a couple of years coaching our managers, learning how to run a coaching business basically, and go from there. And in 2004 we started Equilibrium. And like Rob said, from the very day we started, we've been continually impacting people around the world. And then when we got together with Rob, it just took things to another level altogether. I will just say this, for anybody out there who's not heard about what we're doing so far, what amazed me was how internal looking we are in the oil business and didn't look what other people were doing. I have learned things from Rob going back to not long after he left nuclear many years ago, processes and tools, for example, that I've never seen or were introduced to in my whole oil field career, yet they've been around for 30 or 40 years. And a lot of what we've done together now is refine those processes to bring them into today's world.
Thank you, Louis. So, Luz, you actually mentioned a few moments through your journey or in your life that really have led you to where you are today. Rob, would you have any of those moments, determining moments in your life that you think you could share with us that have led you here? So you mentioned a little bit about the why you do what you do, but are there any determining moments in your life that you can visualize have led you to be the leader who you are today?
I think some of them are hard to talk about. When I was 18, my mother passed away due to a medical error. I didn't know at the time that my life's passion was going to be finding ways to either reduce the probability of an error or mitigate the consequence of an error. I certainly didn't know at the time that through our partnership we'd be moving into some parts of the medical industry that really haven't focused on the things that they can do to reduce that probability or mitigate the consequences like we have today. So I don't think I knew back then that it was an impact. But as I started learning more about how we think and how we perform as a human, there were times in my life that things happened that I feel could have been prevented or mitigated. For instance, I was given a prescription and told by a doctor to do something, and I did what the doctor told me to do with this pill, but it was exactly the opposite of what the prescription said. And in my personality, it's more powerful if you tell me something than if you hand me a piece of paper. So I have to manage that tendency, but back then I didn't know that, so I did what I was told, and it almost killed my wife and I in an automobile accident because my throat seized up instantly, my head threw back because I couldn't breathe, and we went sliding off the road because I took a pill that was supposed to be swallowed whole, and I let it dissolve like the doctor told me to. And as I look around at the way organizations tend to blame people for things that go wrong, I realize that is our human nature to blame someone. But we can overcome human nature if we give people another paradigm. And we can overcome human nature if we give people tools that they can use. So every time we find a way that we can reduce the probability that somebody will be placed in a position that there could be something catastrophic, we pull that string. I like to say that I'm an ex-operator. It kind of overstates my chemistry background because I was probably an average chemist at best too. We built our technology from what does a worker with their hands, the people that would get hurt, maimed, and killed, what would that individual need to reduce that possibility? And we built it from the floor to the top, but we deliver it from the top to the floor. Because if you don't do that, people at the floor will be trying to do things that would help themselves and help the organization, but the leaders don't understand what those things are. So along the way, I had to move myself from being an operator, from being a rig technician, through the levels of management, through the levels of leadership, so that we could communicate with these senior leaders on what role they play on bad outcomes in general. And over the years, I had to make that transition because it is a different language. It is a different, there is a different set of tools for leadership than there is for the workforce in general, whether that's a contracted workforce or an internal workforce. So along the way, I tried to soak in all of these leadership elements. And through our partnership, we've taken a lot of what we've learned along the way with dealing with chief executive officers and the C-suite and vice presidents and what they know and don't know. And we've turned that into what would a leader need to know to lead an effort that would make their place safer, higher quality, more effective, and more efficient. And that journey, that leadership journey has kind of brought us to where we are right now. Am I answering your question?
Yes, you did answer the question, and actually has led me to want to ask you one further question with which we may close our interview. So if I want to provide the opportunity for leaders who are actually watching you speak today and getting the chance to get to know you better from all the experiences that you've had, and understanding that there is no silver bullet, and that it's a process and there are many things that entail being able to get an organization where they need to be to get the desired outcomes they want to get. But if you were to give one piece of advice each to leaders who are out there trying to make a difference for their people, trying to create an environment where people know it's okay to make an error, or trying to create a safe, better quality, more effective environment, if you were to give those people one piece of advice, what would it be that they could go and work on today as an individual leader?
For myself, it would be intentional. It is something that I realized a few years ago. As leaders, we are continually creating experiences for people through our engagements or lack of engagements, whichever way it works. And if we are not intentional, every moment of every day, somebody is missing out. And like it or not, when you're a leader, the microphone is always on and you're always on stage. So that moment when you decide or don't decide, but just drop your guard, you can lose your entire workforce.
So Louis, tell us maybe one example of a way that a leader could be intentional in, let's say, a meeting or an engagement with one of their team members.
So I heard a story recently about a CEO who arrived late at a meeting and finished off sitting on kind of the side of where he would normally sit. And the intern who was sitting next to him turned around to him and said, "You're the CEO, you should be sitting at the head of the table." He said, "Wherever I sit is the head of the table." And so, but his intention was not to draw to himself, it was to just be part of the team, which hopefully in his world was going to give people the opportunity to feel more comfortable and, plonking himself right there at the head of the table. One thing that leaders probably need to very much understand is one day they're not going to be a positional leader, it's going to be the actions that set them apart.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Rob, what about yourself? That one piece of advice that you'd like to leave leaders with today?
Well, I think in order to enable what Louis just talked about, leaders need to understand themselves that they need to be open to learn. Because a change in their language and behaviors, especially related to something like intentionality or understanding their personality tendencies and the tendencies of their team so that they can communicate in a way that everyone understands what's going to happen. That's a leader knowledge element. And we can't ask people to behave differently to get different outcomes if we don't learn what those things are. And I love what Sidney Dekker said the last time he was here, is that you can't ask people to follow a different paradigm unless you give them a better paradigm than the one they're already following. And that's a knowledge issue. So a lot of people say, well, we don't need to do training or we don't need to do education. I have leaders tell me all the time, well, we can't, or I have organizations tell me, we can't get our leaders to come to a workshop. That kind of implies that they think they already know certain elements. But there's a lot of things to know out there that would then drive almost instantly some language and behavior changes that then through engagement very rapidly change the workforce behaviors that could produce the outcome that they want. But instead they're constantly talking about trying to change the culture. Let's try to change the outcome. The reality is it starts with leader knowledge. If the leaders do find out, if they know then they can change their language and behaviors, and everything else will follow that language and behavior change. But they need to learn. And I so often run into people that think they already know, so there's no room for the next paradigm. There's no, even in the Safety Differently movement, or even in some of the HOP movements, the leaders think they already know this is all about the workforce. The reality is it's leader knowledge and then leader language and behaviors that are going to drive those changes organizationally.
Excellent. Thank you very much, gentlemen, for your openness and for sharing some of your knowledge and great advice today. Really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.